Well, hello minders, welcome back to the Mind of Watercolor. Well, I wanted to do another painting on the Hahnemühle Collection paper. This time I'm choosing the 640 GSM or 300 pound. I love 300 pound paper. Arches 300 pound is just lovely to paint on. I've actually taken a sheet off the block. If you're a newbie and are not familiar with the weight of papers, 300 pound is a very heavy board almost. It's just extremely thick. It's great to paint on with very, very wet techniques because it doesn't buckle. It may warp just a little bit, but it doesn't buckle. It's very thirsty, so it takes a little bit of adjustment since typically to re-wet it or pre-wet it, it takes a lot of water and it takes longer to dry. I'm not really a gallery artist per se. Because I have this channel, I do so many demos and studies and stuff. I don't use it exclusively. I think if I were a gallery artist or mostly just a gallery painter, you know what I'm talking about, this is probably what I'd use exclusively. I'm talking about 300 pound, not necessarily Hahnemühle, because it just offers that many advantages. The biggest disadvantage that people run into, of course, is cost. It's much more expensive than 140 pound, which is the more common. But anyway, we're going to give this a try. I already know that I love arches or arch 300 pound. Let me just point out some differences or some similarities. Something I probably should have done with the 140 pound, but they're very similar except for the weight. They're almost identical. This is arches 300 pound paper in a block. I'm not going to separate this. The weight is almost identical. The textures are very, very similar. I'll hold that at an angle to the light so you can see it. This is a handmade, mold-made paper, so it has a very natural, irregular texture, no patterning to it. This is the same with the 140 pound. We'll probably in some other episode get into the hot press, but one difference I noticed, and it's probably not going to show up on video, the Arches is creamier. This is the Arches Natural. Now, Arches does sell a bright white. I would call the Hahnemühle leaning a little more towards bright white. So I guess they kind of picked a nice middle of the road between really bright white and natural. But I really like it. I like the color. But as I said, 300 pound will cost you a little extra dough. Also, very much like arches, the textures differ from side to side. Now, you can paint on either side. They're internally and externally sized. If you turn it over, you see much less texture. According to the Hahnemühle rep that I talked to, they consider this the front, and obviously because that's what they mounted. But if you have pieces that you've painted, maybe you want to just turn it over and do another study, or you don't like the one side, feel free to do that. There's no problem with that. At least I know that's true with the arches. That's probably something I ought to test with Hahnemühle. But all right, so that's what I'm doing today, is testing this paper. And you know me, when I test paper, I like to do spontaneous painting. I will do today a pretty typical spontaneous painting for me, limited palette. I'm probably going to use mostly ultramarine blue and red iron oxide with a little neutral tint. So those three colors. However, another distinctive about this video today that we'll get into is the white ink. Last week's episode was about the whites, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I did a painting where I used one of the whites a little more extensively than I normally do. So look for that. That will come later in the video, and I will be testing the White Ink 30. And the opaque white episode that I did last week, I got the most comments off of that. People were really intrigued, I guess, about the waterproof nature of it. And it's really funny because in that video, I really thought that it was rewettable, and I realized that I knew it was waterproof originally. In fact, I have it in my other white video, and I knew it was an ink, and somehow I just forgot. So I get these mixed up sometime. And yet I have used it frequently over time. So obviously I didn't re-wet it much and had just forgotten. But a white ink is actually very useful, and it dries very matte, provides a lot of advantages for glazing, which it glazes over. So anyway, look for that little bit coming up in this, and just enjoy this spontaneous painting. All right, I'm going to start by pre-wetting this paper. I'm going to wet the whole page. This is my Sterling Edwards blending and glazing brush, and I just want to really test the wet and wet, similar to what I did with the 140 pound. 300 pounds, just a real joy to do wet and wet on, and I just like to throw on some paint and watch it flow. It's just a lot of fun. You don't have to worry about any sort of buckling or anything. You can throw as much water on there as you want to. This is just ultramarine blue and neutral tint, so I'm getting a fairly nice grade blue. Don't know what I'm doing. Don't know what I'm gonna do. As per usual with my spontaneous landscapes here, I'm just creating some edges and stopping the flow and letting it continue in other areas. So typical process for me. It's funny, I sort of fall into these pyramidic compositions, and I don't mean to. It's like if I'm not paying attention or specifically designing my composition, it devolves or just kind of falls off my brush into this pyramid shape, this triangle. I don't know why. Personal tendency. It's like I almost have to make a conscious decision not to do that. Okay, what you saw there is I just threw in a little red iron oxide. But that's it. Those are the three colors: ultramarine blue, red iron oxide, and neutral tint. Just grading edges and contrast. As the paper becomes a little less wet or more soaked in, it flows a little slower. And I'm throwing in a few vertical brushings in there just to kind of start hinting at the tree trunks. Some spatter for a little texture. And about all that's left for me to do is a little detailing. And then I'm going to start working on some detailed tree trunks and branches. All right, well, here's the part I told you about where I'm going to use some of this white ink. This was sort of the most interesting and commented on part of my opaque white video from last week. I thought that was kind of interesting. And here I am testing the color of the white against the paper. White always has a color. And I was really kind of surprised. It's a pretty warm white. I mean, you take something like a gel pen, which tends to be a very cool white, and this matched the paper really well. So it's still a little bit of a standout. On the right there, though, you can barely see it on video, but I tried to tint it a little bit and make it a little warmer. It ended up darkening some, but that's fine. I really wanted it to be warmer. The warmer it is, and the more warm, I guess, it matches your paper, the less it's going to stand out. This is what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to make these sort of like little glints and holes through the tree canopy. Make this all a little less fuzzy and kind of bring a center of interest focus right around where those tree trunks are, and that light, that shaft of light coming down through the trees. Enhance the white and the light. And I was really, really amazed at how much I kept having to thin this white because it was too white. It was too stark. I only needed to lighten those areas. I didn't need them stark white. I did a little glazing over this. It's not going to be very apparent in the video because it was at one point along the way where I would just brush a little bit of that blue-gray over the color after it had dried. I'm not sure you'll even be able to see or tell. But let me just tell you, the color glazed over it just fine. And I'm also using it to do a little bit of positive painting, not just the negative painting. Fun stuff. Just really fun painting that area right there. And there we go. This is the finished piece. Loved it. Loved doing it. Really enjoyed this. Hope you did too. Thanks for watching. The Hahnemühle paper did great. Thank you, patrons, for your support. It means the world. And we'll see everybody in the next video. Bye-bye.